Hey everybody, it's Ron with Ron's Computer Videos. I want to thank you for taking time out of your evening and spending it here with us. I've got a great guest tonight. Let's get right to it. He's a former Apple employee with decades of support experience with both Apple II and Macintosh computers, Mr. Jimmy Mensch. Jimmy, how are you this evening? Or should I say Mensch?
Groovy. Groovy. Just fine.
Well,
Yeah,
great.
if you use my first name, the people who I worked with won't recognize me.
Well, we'll try to keep it properly informal this evening then. So, well, let me ask you this. What first inspired you to get interested in computers?
Well, now see, that's interesting.
Well, I
I
hope so.
I in high school, I kind of wanted to take easy classes because I was a slacker. And one of the easy classes was the key punch class. I don't know if your listeners know what key punch is, but that's how you made punch cards for computers back in the 1960s and 70s, everyone. So anyway, there was this key punch class, and I took this key punch class, and one of the things we had to do was we would, look at programs that people had written and transcribe them onto cards. That was one of the exercises, and during one of the exercises, I punched in a bunch of stuff and then handed the deck into the teacher. And I also handed him 5 extra cards. It was taught by the computer programming teacher. It's part of the business school. It was a big high school. We had a business thing where they taught secretarial
Mhm.
and business skills and writing business letters and nonsense like that. I'll try not to swear. Uh, anyone who's read my Apple IIGS source code knows that I'm prone to swearing. Um, so I handed him 5 extra cards. I said, here are the fixes for the mistakes he made. And he looked at it and he said, oh, okay. And that was that. And a week later, he said, you should probably learn how to program computers. You have a knack for it. And I thought, yeah, that'll be fine. Sure, why not?
Yeah.
But I didn't really do much about that because I thought my future was going to be working with my hands. I figured, working, during the day, I was hupping bags of concrete and selling plumbing fixtures and threading pipe and cutting pipe and doing lots of that kind of shenanigans. And I was walking by this computer store one day, and there was a guy inside just washing down the counters. He had a bottle of Windex and a rag in his hand. He was with corduroy pants, a sweater vest, tie on. And I was cold and it was miserable. And I thought, God, he probably makes more money than I do. And so the next time they had a help wanted sign at that store, I applied for the job. And it was in the service department, and I didn't know how to repair a computer. I figured out I didn't have the slightest idea how to repair a computer, really. Um, I mean, I understood how electricity worked. We learned that in 8th grade. Um, but I applied for the job, and um, the guy who ran the service department, he asked me some questions, and I guess he decided I wasn't too big of an idiot. I took my comment to him was basically, "How hard can this be?" No, I know how to install a toilet. I know how to plumb out a sink. How hard can this be? And so um, he showed me how to, he pulled down a broken Apple II, showed me how he fixed it. Took him maybe 15 minutes. And he pulled another one down, put it on the bench, and said, okay, you do it.
Mhm.
And at first, I was a little taken aback because mine had a different failure than his had. That doesn't matter because I watched what he was doing and how he did it. And I followed basically the same procedure he used. and I fixed the computer. He said, "You'll do." And that's how I got my job, working at a computer store in the Chicago suburbs, a place called Nabih Incorporated. They were one of the biggest Apple dealers in the country, actually. I mean, they sold, they had to get special permission from Apple to sell computers to school districts in Texas because the school districts in Texas only wanted to deal with Nabih. Because
that's a really good arrangement to have. Yeah.
well, he, you know, some people liked him, some people didn't like him. What I found interesting about Nabih was he knew how to answer a bid from school. He could just read the bid and think, these guys care about the price of the floppy disks. Yeah. So I'm going to make the floppy drives cheap. And that's how we're going to bid this one. These people care about the whole system price. So that's what we're going to focus on. And so he just knew how to sell to school districts and was really good at it. Mm-hmm. And so we sold a lot of Apple IIs to schools. Yeah. And that's where I learned how to fix Apple IIs, and I learned about electronics, and I learned how to do drive speed adjustments, drive alignments. I actually learned, that's where I learned how to diagnose from a schematic instead of brute force. Well, you laugh, but yeah. Apple dealers, you know, you go online and you look at Adrian Black. He's online. He does all of these great videos. I don't know the name of his channel. Doesn't matter. And he spends an hour diagnosing a problem. And that's cool because he is explaining to people, here's my thought processes. I'm doing this. I'm looking at this signal. I'm looking at that signal. When you worked at a computer store, that was not, when you were doing service on an Apple, that was never your job. You did service on an Apple. You had a working motherboard and a busted motherboard. And you would, if you knew how the computer worked, you might go, oh, it's a video problem. I'm going to start down in this corner. Right. But if you didn't know what you were doing, you'd pull a row of chips out, swap them from the good board to the questionable board, turn it on, see if it works. If it works, it's one of those chips. Basically, it's a binary search for a broken chip. And that's how you did the majority of your repairs. You didn't have blown reef of capacitors. That didn't happen. You didn't have bad capacitors in things because if they were installed properly the first time, they worked great. Capacitors fail after 25 or 30 or 40 years, not in the first year or two. So there was a lot of very mechanical services involved. Like somebody would bring in their computer, I can't boot my disk. There's very basic steps, you know, check the disk speed, try it yourself, use a known good disk, all the simple things you would go through to fix a computer. And the whole reason you did that was because you needed to get the things fixed. You couldn't spend an hour and a half fixing somebody's computer. If you spent an hour and a half fixing somebody's computer, you just billed them for $200.
Yeah.
People didn't have $200 to spend to get a computer fixed. And if it was under warranty, that was even easier. So if it was under warranty, you'd walk over to the big rack of boxes from Apple. You pull down the service spare, which is just a module. You open up the box, pull the new motherboard out, take the old motherboard out of the case, plop it in. You might move the RAM over. You know, make sure the RAM was right. If you were dropping an Apple II motherboard into an Apple II Plus, you change the ROMs out real fast because, contrary to popular belief, there was no end to when Apple produced the Apple II. Apple stopped producing Apple IIs when school districts stopped ordering Apple IIs. And so retail, there was a switch over where they pretty much only sold 2 pluses, but school districts, they could keep buying Apple II. So you might find, a Rev 6 motherboard with integer basic ROMs in it because the school district wanted to buy 50 of them. There you go.
Yeah.
So you put in the new module, turn it on, beep, check it out, run the confidence test on it, run the memory test, do all of that stuff, box up the thing, tape it up, send it back to Apple. And the way it worked is when you bought that motherboard, when you were an Apple dealer and you bought that motherboard, you might pay $1,000 for that motherboard. So I think it was more like $800 or $700, but you paid a lot. But you would take the service return, it's like a core charge at an auto parts store.
Right.
You box up the old board, send that back to Apple, and then Apple would send you a reworked board in its place, and they would charge you the rework fee, which was like maybe $80 or $90. So instead of $700 for a new board, they paid $80 for the new board and a half an hour of labor. We built our labor out at a half an hour at a time, I recall. Could be wrong, but that's what I recall. At any rate, that's how most service got done. And there's a lot of people walking around saying, well, this is a Frankenstein Apple II because it's an early serial number, but it has a Rev 7 motherboard in it. It's not a Frankenstein Apple II. More than likely, that was an Apple II that went to a service center in 1982, and it was broken, and they pulled out the Rev 0 motherboard and sent it back to Apple when Apple threw it away because those weren't repaired. And in fact, at some point in time, Apple just purged their entire stock of Rev 0 through Rev 6 motherboards in service. Because why would you send an old revision out to a customer? You'd want them to have the best board possible.
Right.
So you'd send them the latest board. I know nowadays people are anxious about originality and things like that, but originality wasn't important. What was important was we wanted to get them, here's the latest, here's the greatest, here's the coolest. Right. It's exactly what you need. And we did things like we would upgrade. I remember we had a guy bring in an Apple II regular that had 12K of RAM in it, and he had one bad RAM chip. And for the price of a half an hour service, we just pulled out all of the 4K RAM chips, put in one row of 16K RAM chips, changed out the jumpers, and said, here you go. Now you have 16K.
Now that's customer service.
That's because by 1979, the reason Apple stopped selling systems with 4K RAM chips in it, I believe they stopped in 78. Mm-hmm. But it was because 16K RAM chips were exactly the same price as 4K RAM chips, and nobody was making 4K RAM chips anymore. So we didn't have them in stock.
Right.
What am I going to do? Charge him for one RAM chip, half an hour service, send him on his way, put in 16K. Yeah, okay. That's fine. Yep. And so that happened a lot. Things like that would happen all the time. You'd silently upgrade things because it's cheaper and easier for everybody involved. Cheaper for the guy didn't want to wait 2 weeks so we could get a 4K RAM chip in.
Right.
So,
still, it's really nice though. It's like from a customer point of view, I think that's one of the things that there were so many people at different parts of the system that were like, you know what? It's easier for us, but from a customer point of view, it's like I got this free upgrade, as part of this repair. So it, helps build out that brand and
sure.
gives them a good feeling, the next time it's ready, they're ready to purchase a machine.
Sure. Back when, back in the 80s, Apple wasn't the only company that did that in the 80s. I remember taking a broken CD player back to a store that I had bought it at 2 years before, and they took it and said, okay, well, it's out of warranty. And I said, all right, well, how much does it cost to fix it?
Mhm.
They called the manufacturer, and the manufacturer said, tell them it costs $200 to fix it and hand them a new CD player. Had them, at the time, it was like a $600 CD player.
Right.
So that's what they did. They just handed me the next model because they didn't fix that old model anymore.
Right.
They didn't even want to fix the old model. It just had problems.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how things happened. And it's kind of how things happen today, but people don't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you take a smartphone in to get it serviced and it gets serviced by the company, they'll just drop in the latest revision of whatever board it had,
Right.
you know, or actually what they do is they just pull off a refurbished one right off the shelf, transfer your data over, hand you the new one that probably doesn't have the same scratches in the screen, might not have the same scratches around back, you know, it's all polished up, looks nice.
Okay.
It's might have a fresh SSD in it or something like that. You don't even know that. But that's the easiest and cheapest way for it to be done, and it made people happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I worked at that computer store for a while, fixing computers and answering questions, selling computers. I sold computers. We sold Vector Graphic, Alpha
Mhm.
Micro, Vector Graphic and Alpha Micro are both S100 systems. Alpha Micro was like a 68,000 based S100 system. Vector Graphic was a CPM system. We sold two other CPM systems, S100 CPM systems. We sold Southwest Technical Products. Those are terrible. They had the fingers in the back plane, and you plugged the board into it, and the fingers got dirty, and the boards worked out. It's terrible. We sold TI calculators. We sold typewriters. We sold Smith Corona typewriters and Royal typewriters, and
Mhm.
we, you know, if it was a business thing, we sold it.
Yeah.
And HP calculators too. And geez, I still even have a couple HP calculators from when I worked there.
Mhm.
And I learned a lot from there. I learned how to write software for the Apple II. I learned because, you know, we'd have customers come in and say, I bought this Apple Pascal and I don't know how to write a piece of software. So I set up a time and sit down with the book, figure it out, write a program, convince myself I knew what I was doing, and then come on in, I'll show you how.
Well, it's like teaching your kids how to play piano. You only got to stay one lesson ahead.
Yes. Yes. And so I learned how to sell computers. I learned how to talk to customers. I learned how to do technical support. I learned how to make a spreadsheet in VisiCalc because
Yeah.
boy, did VisiCalc sell Apple IIs.
Mm-hmm. That's the killer app.
You know, there was a point in time where I think we sold a visit for every over-the-counter Apple II we sold. I think we sold one copy of VisiCalc for every two Apple IIs that went out the door.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a game changer for everybody. And we sold IDS 4030 paper tiger printers. And it was an epiphany when my boss discovered that I knew how to fix the print heads because they would jam up. And
Jam up, yeah.
it cost $300 for a new print head for the printer. I figured out how to disassemble it, clean it all up, straighten out the pins or take pins from another one. And I figured out how to fix them. We started fixing them for half the price. We sold Lear Siegler terminals, ADM3A terminals.
Mm-hmm.
We would buy the kit. The kit was like $150 cheaper than the fully assembled terminal. We would buy the kit. I would make them at home in my spare time and bring them to work. And for that, I'd make like $50 for putting the terminal together. Actually, I think it was more like $40. But so that, and we sold a lot of stuff. It was a big store.
Oh yeah.
They were one of Apple's last independent dealers too.
Yeah. I was going to say, because for a very long time, that was the only way that you could buy things. There was, or get
Yeah,
service, were
yeah,
these independent stores that were just
that's right.
partnered with Apple.
That's
Uh,
right. It was only independent dealers.
yeah. And they seem to pop up around colleges and places like that, where they already had like kind of
Yes.
a installed base, so that way that you could get the faculty, you could get people in. I've interviewed quite a few people over the years that have been people that have either worked at those little computer shops, or were instructors, and people that worked at
Hmm.
colleges that frequented those places. That there, it's like it was so great. You could just go in, you knew everybody, you
Yeah.
could just get things done. It was just a very personal kind of experience.
It's funny you should say that, because now that I think about it, there were three colleges. Well, there was Kendall College, National College of Education, and Northwestern University.
Hmm.
We're all in Evanston where we were.
Yeah, made
And
sense.
you could walk to Northwestern from the store. It was a nice walk too. Beautiful. A lot of trees in Evanston. It's a beautiful place.
Hmm.
Anyway, so
Well,
I worked there for a while, and then I got a job at a place called American Hospital Supply.
mhm.
And at American Hospital Supply, I was a mainframe computer operator and a something analyst. I don't remember. But I worked there for a while. That's
Yeah,
I worked on a Burroughs B7800 mainframe. Those were pretty cool.
yeah.
Not a lot
It's
about those on the internet.
probably not. I know there's more information that's been lost to history, especially about that era of computing, just because
Yeah.
every company that had any kind of footprint in the business world was just throwing things at
Yeah.
the wall to see what would stick.
Well,
All of these one-off kind of things, or everybody's trying to grab a little piece of IBM's pie.
mhm. Well, Burroughs actually wrote their operating system in a high-level language. They were one of the very first mainframe companies to write their operating system in a high-level language. And they took Algol, which is like Pascal,
Mhm.
and they added a bunch of features to it so that it could write an operating system, and they called it SBAL. And that's what you programmed the Burroughs computer in. And I really honed my Pascal skills at American Hospital Supply.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, I know that with your past experience with just kind of like starting out, where it's like, hey, you've got an affinity for programming and for
Mhm.
all of this technical stuff, and you worked and you learned all the electronic skills and things for
Mhm.
the repair side of it. I know that kind of we were talking about how Apple had a policy at the time to like not poach people out of these partner stores and
Oh,
things.
yes,
So
absolutely. You wouldn't, Apple would not hire you if you worked for an Apple dealer,
yeah,
because they're your business partner,
right.
right? They're the only people who can sell your computers in your area. And you can't just willy-nilly go and say, hey, that guy's good, we'll take him. If you did that, because they had other choices to make. They had other computers they could sell. There was no Apple dealer.
Right.
You sold to everybody. You sold TI, you sold HP, you sold everything you could.
Right.
And so Apple didn't want to piss off their dealers, and that was a good policy because
Yeah.
their dealers were pretty damn loyal.
Right.
So yeah, if you worked for an Apple dealer, they would not approach you for a job. I mean, you could approach them for a job, and then they might consider you, but they would never approach you about a job ever.
Okay. Well, is that when with moving or with moving to this new job, is that kind of what made the divide, so that way that you could eventually go
Oh,
there?
well, that's actually how I got the job at Apple.
Okay.
Apple was opening up support centers around the country. 6 support centers: Charlotte, North Carolina, Boston. That's in Massachusetts.
Mhm.
You knew that. Dallas. Do I need to tell you where Dallas is?
It's somewhere near the border, I think.
Yes. Chicago.
Yeah.
Or Rolling Meadows, more specifically. Irvine, California, and Sunnyvale, California. And these support centers were basically warehouses where product got shipped from. They were level 2 service centers where dealers would send the broken boards back to be reworked. They had IT, they had people selling service parts and taking service orders. Tech support group. I worked in the tech support group at one of them. Human resources. Basically, it was a mini company whose job it was to distribute and support Apple computers. Although it was wholly owned by it was Apple, but it kind of ran like its own little site. And so they were opening up a site in Chicago, Rolling Meadows, actually. And they were having a hard time finding a tech support engineer to fill one role that they had open. And it was coming down to the wire. And one of the sales guys, his name was Don. I think he worked on MacWorks or whatever became AppleWorks for the Mac.
Okay.
I think he wrote that. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I got a call from him, and he told me to show up at this address in Rolling Meadows Monday morning at 9 a.m. with a resume in hand, wearing a suit, cleanly shaven. And I said, why? He said, you're interviewing for a job. Okay. And I worked at American Hospital. I worked nights. I worked an 8-hour shift from 8 at night till 8 in the morning. So no problem. I could get there by 9. And I showed up, handed him my resume and cover letter, or actually I didn't have a cover letter, just handed them my resume. They interviewed me. I got a good recommendation from Nabih.
Yeah.
And got a really good recommendation from that sales guy. And so they hired me. And that's how I got into Apple. Was they were running short of time to open the Chicago Support Center. In fact, my first day at Apple, see, what does this say here? 3/29/82. Right. I think we opened up April 1st.
Really down to the wire.
Oh, no, actually, maybe we opened up that day.
Oh, wow.
I was there on the first day of the Chicago Support Center.
That's awesome.
It's official opening.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's actually how I got my job at Apple. Is the sales guy remembered me, and he knew that I had left Nabih's, and so I guess he got my phone number from Nabih and called me and said, come take this job, basically.
Well, that's really good. It's and I think that underlines part of the thing of, if you're a knowledgeable person and you make those connections and stuff, that it could certainly open up some doors for you.
Yeah, try and be friendly with people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't successful at that in my career, of being, but that was one time when I was pleasant to people. Sorry.
Well, no, it's all right. Let me ask you this though. I do think that that kind of the creation of all of these support centers was almost kind of the beginning of the end for some of this other repair stuff that happened out in the field. Of course, there was always going to be a little bit of these partnerships with like computer stores and things like that to do service for your customers, but having a more centralized location for like parts distribution and kind of having that second level of support probably helped sort of make it easier for this, because I think people think about it nowadays where you just drop ship something from FedEx and it comes the next day.
Oh yeah, that didn't exist.
Yeah, that didn't exist. So
That didn't
so
exist. You didn't do that. That cost like $500.
yeah. I think in that like around that time when FedEx kind of came around, it was like
Yeah.
a letter distribution thing where it's like you get a letter the next day, but certainly not a package or something.
Yeah.
So would you say that kind of the creation of all of these like distribution and technical support hubs kind of helped or kind of maybe change and evolve the way that Apple dealt with resellers and customers? To maybe address like how big they were kind of growing at that point.
No, it actually did the opposite.
Oh wow.
What was happening was, in 1978 and 79, Apple wasn't giant. It wasn't huge. By 1982, actually by 1981, the good people in Cupertino, they were getting stretched a little thin. You can only have so many tech support people in a room. You can only have so many service guys on a line.
Sure.
And shipping and receiving was taking too long because there's too many packages and it's a big accounting nightmare. And they just decided, look, we want to be able to ship packages faster. We want dealers to be able to get product faster. So that's when they decided to open up the distribution centers. That was actually just to get product to dealers faster so that there was a closer warehouse that could ship you your product. You could actually get something in a day for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, probably not if you were in the middle of Colorado, because that was about 2 days from Dallas or Chicago.
Sure.
But when they decided to open up the distribution centers, they realized, we have service parts and we got to sell those. Let's get the service parts out there. And if we're going to have the service parts out there, let's get the level 2 service centers out there too. And so they moved level 2 service into the field as well. And then they decided, well, if we're going to have all of that and people are going to have the local phone number and they're going to be calling up to place orders for service and this and that and the other thing, and it's primarily the service person at the dealership who usually called Apple for tech support. So the way the dealership worked is you'd come in with a problem or a question for your computer. They'd probably ask the guy in the service department because the guy in the service department probably knew a little more than the sales guys did.
Sure.
Not always. There were some really sharp sales guys, and so that's how come they had tech support in the field as well. And the whole goal was to kind of put it back and give the dealers back access to Apple. Because, at a certain point in time, you couldn't just pick up the phone and call Apple anymore because it was always busy. Well, now with the regional support centers, dealers could pick up the phone and call Apple. And that's what we did. We sat there. They'd call. We'd answer the phone. We had red phones. They were the hotline. It was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
We actually also took customer questions. Customers would call our local message. It was actually a answering machine with the cassette in it and everything. Every morning when we got into work, it would be somebody's turn to sit down with a stack of support requests and transcribe, write it all out, take the phone numbers, do whatever. We'd call the customers back. We did direct customer support at the same time. And we did all sorts we answered questions on anything people could ask. If you wanted to know how to do this on Apple Pascal or Apple Fortran or Pilot or God only knows what, we would answer it. Wow. If you wanted to know how come Apple Writer doesn't print to my printer, we'd help you out with that. We would even send out patches. I remember writing patches for Apple Writer so it would properly print to certain printers that required very specific control sequences. And we would go in and actually manually figure out where in the code to patch and, change a couple, 3 or 4 bytes. And then I would write a basic program that would load in the file, make the patches, save the file to another disk. Try that. I mean, we did that kind of nonsense all the time.
That's pretty amazing. It's just like the amount of different skills that you would need to have in some of those positions. It seems like that you've not only have to have like the customer service side, you've got to have the engineering side, that you've got to be able to program, you've got to understand how software and hardware works together.
Yeah.
Just the diverse amount of skills that are required just to be in one of those kind of engineering jobs is nuts.
We actually taught the level 1 service class for dealers.
Wow.
We took turns teaching. There's a week-long class where we teach dealers how to fix an Apple computer. And we even taught them how to solder key switches in.
It's like, well, this is what you do when you get just this amount of coffee in your keyboard. You're going to need you're going to need to replace these switches.
Yes. Yeah. When your Coke spills, because the coffee, it'll dry up. The Coke, nah, that shorts everything out.
Sticky. Yeah.
But yeah, we taught them how to fix drives and how to fix motherboards, and we would even teach them how to do basic troubleshooting on the board so that they didn't have to keep sending us every broken board in the world.
Right.
Because we didn't want them to do that.
Mm-hmm.
If they could grab a 5.25-inch drive from a customer that said, I don't know what happened, it doesn't work anymore. You flip the drive door open, give it the sniff test, and go, you plugged the cable in wrong.
Yeah.
Because that 74 125, or is it 175? That chip just blew every time you plug the cable in wrong because you shoved 12 volts right up it.
Yep.
And we would teach them things like that. Crack the door on the drive open, give it a little sniff. If it smells acrid, they probably plugged it in wrong. You're going to take the cover off. You're going to see a chip. It's the 75 125. It's got a crater in the top of it where the label used to be. And so we would give them all sorts of kind of tips and tricks like that. If it's a video problem, it's down here. If if the computer's doing these weird things, it's a RAM problem. Look at the RAM. It's probably a RAM problem. Tell them to keep their fingers out of the RAM. Tell the customer to stop touching the RAM chips.
Right.
Chips were a little more static sensitive back then.
Right. I was going to say, I remember the switch from where a lot of people's workbenches had that, they would carpet them.
Yeah.
And then they were like, not anymore.
Yeah.
Now it's going to be some sort of like Formica or something.
Layer, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you'd have the little grounding straps.
Yes. I've watched a lot of those videos from back in the day where the anti-static precautions are just off the chart.
I got to say, I'm kind of disappointed in the internet. I see a lot of videos from a lot of people fixing old computers.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not wearing grounding straps. And I got to tell you, on the old stuff, on anything that was made in the 70s,
mm-hmm.
static electricity is a problem.
Yeah.
And if you don't have yourself properly grounded, you could very easily make things worse by touching it.
Oh, sure.
So
and it's you can totally just run down to the shop and pick up some of those custom ICs. I mean, you can get those anywhere, right?
Sure, yeah. I hear they're making them by the 1s and 2s.
Yeah, exactly. No,
and I got to say, I really enjoyed being in the field tech support. And then one day corporate called and said, hey, you got to come out here and work out here. Yeah. I thought, oh, great.
I was going to ask when the transition was because of working in it.
December of 1985.
That's the transition from service center to being kind of part of that software engineering team for the Apple II.
No, what I went to was when we were in the field, we had a group we called when we had a question.
Mhm.
That was called TechCom. And well, one day TechCom called me up and said, we need you to come out here and work for us. And I said, okay, how come? And they said, just do it. Okay. So that's when I went out to Cupertino, and that's when I was told, here, this is what we're shipping next year. You need to learn everything in the universe about this new Apple II.
And
Great.
I'm guessing this is the Apple II GS.
This is the Apple II GS.
Well, excellent. 2026 is the 40th anniversary of the
Yes,
Apple
it
II
is.
GS, and I am a huge fan of this machine. I growing up, going to school, we always had Apple IIs, we had IIes, we had a lot of those other machines. We had an entire lab that was nothing but 2Cs, but the 2GS, that was the first Apple that my parents actually purchased back in the day. And
Like every other Apple II before it, it was its own worst nightmare. It's hard for people to hear this. It's hard for people to understand. Like when the Apple II first became popular, standards weren't that big of a thing. If you got CP/M, which was a standard operating system, you had to get the version of CP/M that somebody wrote specifically for whatever crappy collection of S100 cards you shoved into a bus. You know, you couldn't just go and buy Windows and it'll run on any IBM PC compatible, blah, 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 blah. That didn't exist. Everything was new. Everything was custom. When Woz did the Apple II, the design of the Apple II, he actually designed a computer that was cheaper than everything else on the market. When Apple came out with the Disk 2, that was the cheapest disk drive you could buy for a microcomputer when it came out. It was way cheaper than those other drives because it came with a controller card and a drive, and the drive for, let's say, the drive for like a vector graphic, that AS400 drive was $700.
Yeah.
The floppy drive for the Apple II was $499 with a controller card.
Yeah.
And when you got the AS400, then you still had to get another $500 S100 card to put in there. So when it first came out, it was really inexpensive, and it was inexpensive because of the very clever engineering choices that Apple had made. The problem when you make clever engineering choices are they get old quick. They get very old very quickly. And the Apple II's greatest strength was all of the really cool software that worked with it. It was just amazing. I mean, the educational games, like Oregon Trail. People still talk about the Oregon Trail game, for God's sakes. That came out on the Apple II originally. But all of these really cool games like Phantoms 5 and Apple Panic. I loved Apple Panic. Apple Panic was a great game. Sorry. All of these games were great and all of the stuff was great, but what it meant was, well, you can't call it an Apple II unless it has high res and low res and goofy weird text screen. And then we did the 2E, and now it has to have double high res, double low res, and goofy 80 column text screen and goofy bank switching mode. Because how else are you going to get more than 64K onto a 6502? And so every triumph for the Apple II added a lot of debt that the future had to pay, right? Because you couldn't really make an Apple. If you made an Apple II without any of that stuff, you know what you'd have? A Macintosh. If you disregarded all of the Apple II features, that's what a Macintosh was. That's what you would have. You would have a completely different computer. the beauty of the Apple IIGS was that it could do all of those cool things. We had those great custom ICs we made. It was just masterful. It was great, but it had to have a 65816 in it. It couldn't use a 68,000. And the 65816 was nice. It was actually fast for its speed. I know that's something people don't understand because everybody understands megahertz, but like if you compare a 1 megahertz Z80 against a 1 megahertz 6502, actually 1 megahertz 8080 against a 1 megahertz 6502, actually I'm pretty sure it's true with the Z80 as well, you'll find that the 8080 is half as fast. So the 6502, the 65816, they were great. Very low transistor count, didn't use a lot of electricity, just super simple instruction set. Was almost like a RISC chip before RISC existed. I mean, it was really great. And we had to use it for the 2GS. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to run all of that Apple II software because the 65816 could perfectly be a 65CO2. When Western Design did the 65816, they made it a perfect 65CO2 at the same time. And so that was a little bit of genius on their part. By the way, no relation.
Right.
That was really a little bit of genius on their part in knowing that, you know, we could be another 16-bit chip in this big sea of 16-bit chips, but if we were 6502 compatible, then we might get the Apple business.
Right.
And as it turns out, Nintendo loved the 65816 as well.
Yep.
Although they got a Japanese version of it,
right,
from somebody else, but I think they licensed it from Western Design. So I'm not sure how that went. So anyway, that's how I got onto the Apple II GS project.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved being on the 2GS project. It was really nice. I already knew how to program a Macintosh. I understood events and windows and menus and controls, but the Macintosh always felt very distant for some reason. It never felt super comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, the 2GS always felt very close. I mean, I had no qualms about disassembling a routine, walking right through it and going, yeah, this is what's wrong. We need to fix this, or we need to fix that, or we need to do this, or we need to do that. And I love being on the GS project. There was a guy who ran part of the project. His name was Eagle.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Eagle Eye.
Yes, his middle initial was I. That's the letter I. Well, he kind of ran a bunch of it, and we were in a meeting, and this was months before the GS shipped, and they were talking about game this, game that, what are game developers, blah, 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 blah. Can you even write a game in super high res mode, blah, 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 blah. And Eagle said, of course you could. And as the meeting finished up, he looked at me and he said, how'd you like to have a bet? And I said, what? He said, we're going to write the first Apple II game, the first Apple II GS game, you and me. One of us is going to do it. And I said, okay, well, what do you want it to be? He said, has to use the toolbox, has to be in a window, has to have a menu bar, has to use the mouse, has to have sound, and it has to have some sort of animation. And that was on a Friday, about 11 in the morning. I was done at Friday at 7 at night.
Wow.
He wasn't done until Sunday morning. I wrote the first 2GS super high-res game.
What was
Apple
it?
actually shipped it.
What was it?
Breakout.
Oh yeah.
It was on a developer sample disk, and at
Mhm.
some point in time, they even licensed it to somebody who was doing a switcher for the Apple IIGS. Was that Mike Westerfield?
I don't know.
They had the switcher program for the 2GS so that you
Yeah.
could have
The
multiple.
multitasking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't even know how that actually, I don't remember it. All I know is I had to sign a form saying, yeah, it's okay. Go ahead. He can license it. Sure. Because I was the lead engineer on it. And here's the sad part. I wrote the first one.
Mhm.
Eagle wrote the better one. His was better than mine, but we couldn't ship his. Because
What was his?
he basically wrote an Apple IIGS version of a Mac game called Daleks.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
it actually is a really cool game, and we loved playing it. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody, a lot of the engineering people loved playing Daleks.
Mhm.
And so he wrote Daleks, and it was beautiful. It wasn't, mine was multicolor.
Mhm.
His was black and white.
Right.
But he had all the Dalek sound effects and everything. He brought them all over from the Mac and put them in. And I mean, so his was a better game. But mine was done first.
I swear that I've played the Daleks, some version of Daleks on the 2GS back in the day. But
It's possible that somebody
Yeah.
else wrote a version of it, or it's possible that that version leaked at some point in time.
I'm
That
now
I don't know.
curious. Yeah.
That I don't know, but I do know that Apple couldn't sell it. Actually, I wouldn't be surprised if Eagle just called up whatever company it was that made Daleks and said, "Hey, do you
Mhm.
want the source code to Daleks for the 2GS? Here you go."
Yeah.
Because
Get it out there.
it was all about, let's get people excited about this product. Let's get people excited about this computer. This is a really cool thing. I mean, we had that really cool sales demo.
Mm-hmm.
That sales demo was spectacular.
Yeah.
That was written by Ron Lichty. No, it was the other guy.
Mm-hmm.
One of the guys who wrote a book with him. I forget. I can't remember names so good anymore.
Well, it's okay.
They drilled a hole in the side of my head 20 years ago, and now I don't remember so good.
Oh no.
But I don't. I forget who that other guy was. Anyway, he was a big deal in the 2GS at the beginning as well, because
Mm-hmm.
you know he wrote a book about 2GS programming and about 816 programming, and David Eisen wrote a book about 816 programming. I think he wrote some software too. That 2GS sales demo was so cool.
Mm-hmm. I'm fairly certain that that's what sold my parents on the 2GS, because the local, I think it was called Computer Corner, and it was the Apple store in our little college town. And you if you're looking at that running on a 2GS, and then you're looking at a Mac Plus, I'm pretty sure that everybody was like, the 2GS is the way to go, especially
the
with
2GS was $1,000 cheaper.
Yeah.
With a
And
monitor.
then, yes, and color monitor, and with all of the, so you could throw an image writer 2 in there. You could get a whole stack of software and then still have price parity. So
you could run AppleWorks.
That too.
Mac didn't have AppleWorks.
No. You had if you didn't buy a hard drive, you had a hurt wrist from swapping disks.
Well, System 3.1, you could fit, if you had 2 floppies, that would work.
Yes.
If you had 2 3.5-inch floppies, you could boot 3.1 and run it all day.
Sure.
Not 5. System Disk 5, man, we made that a lot bigger.
Yeah.
Had to be bigger. We had to fit a whole bunch of new tools and everything into it when we did System Disk 5.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed working on System Disk 5.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about that. As part of working on the TGS team, I know that we had talked about that one of the things that you were put in charge of were squashing bugs on System 5. So
Yes.
what were maybe some of the challenges on that? Because my understanding was not everybody was happy with some of those management decisions that were made about the point releases, that not everything got addressed.
Here's the problem. The problem is you release system GSOS 5.0. I think that was what its official name was. I'm pretty sure it was.
Mm-hmm.
We released it out into the world, and people start using it, and they go, this is great. Oh no, it crashed. This is great. Oh no, it crashed.
Yeah.
And then you do a software release, and you can't do a fast software turn of software of that size in a reasonable amount of time, because everybody has a bug they want to get fixed. And my boss at the time, Steve, a different Steve than the other two Steves.
Right.
Apple had lots of Steves. We had all the Steves. So my boss, he came into my office, I think it was maybe for 501 or 502. And he basically said, we need to get a new release out in 2 weeks. And I said, okay. What do you want me to do? And he handed me a stack of bugs and he said, find these, fix these. Okay. Who else is working on this? No one. Find them and fix them. It's just you fix these. We got to get this done really quickly. And the only way to get it done really quickly was don't ask other people to do things. Don't get everybody involved. Don't open it up so that everybody can fix their pet bug. Because there were other bugs that people legitimately wanted to fix.
Sure.
I mean, with System 5, we released the text editor, right? The text edit toolbox.
Right.
Well, we didn't fix any bugs in text edit in that particular system release because there was no third-party software yet that used it.
Right.
Nobody was using it yet. So if it crashes when you do this, we'll fix that in the next system. We'll fix that in the next update. It'll come out in a couple of months.
Right.
But the idea was we had to get something done just as quickly as possible. And so I sat and I spent, I don't know, maybe 4 days fixing this stack of bugs. They added 2 more onto it. We fixed all the bugs and sent it to testing, and a whole bunch of other people started testing it. I mean, everybody was just banging away on it, trying to find, were these bugs fixed and was there anything else that absolutely needed to be fixed? He said, that's good. That's what we're going to ship. They slapped the number on it, sent it to manufacturing. Here you go. Here's your next system release. But that's a kind of an emergency thing that you can't actually do anymore. None of that is possible anymore. I remember when we were finalizing the ROM for the ROM 3, we had our Golden Master ROM. And we sent it to manufacturing. We sent them the tape. And then the next day we called manufacturing and said, stop making those ROMs. Because there was a really, really, really bad bug with the serial ports.
Oh, no. Yeah.
And it had to be fixed. It had to be fixed. And sadly, that was also the day they demonstrated HyperCard 2GS to the executive staff. And when they demonstrated HyperCard 2GS to the executive staff, the HyperCard team had never rented on a ROM 3 machine before. So they set up this ROM 3 machine, they booted it all up, it ran just great. They had their HyperCard demo stack, and they were showing them this, showing them that, and then they had this little thing, this little box that had 4 buttons on it, and it was speech. You'd press it and it'd play digitized speech, and then you'd press this button and it would play a little tune, and you press this button and it would play like an orchestral thing, and you press this button and it would play white noise.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as they knew, it always played white noise. And the way they got their white noise was they played the ROM. And unfortunately, when they did it on on a round 3 machine, it would go because somebody had buried a sound in the ROM that played when you did the secret about box. And Steve came into my office and said, what is this? And I said, oh, well, there was extra room in the ROM. We weren't using it. Because if you looked at that sound, it was like patched together. There was a bunch of different holes in the ROM, and I filled them all up with sound. And I had done my own sound behind everybody's back. Nobody else knew about it. And it was just me saying, Apple II forever. Which was about, I mean, I wasn't trying to be dour. It's just how I sounded. And, well, since we were having to pull the ROM to do the serial port fix, Steve decided, yeah, we're taking that sound out. I'm like, oh, poop. Can't we do something? He said, yeah, you're going to record a new sound. So he collected up everybody in software engineering. We went over by where the printing engineering people were, because it was like a little covey, a little cove. And 3, 2, 1, Apple II. Everybody said Apple II. That's the sound that went into the Golden Master 2 ROM. That's basically the whole team. And it's actually a better idea. And I would have actually done the whole team myself, except I figured more people who knew about it, the bigger likelihood they would tell me I had to pull it out.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's something like that. You have to keep a secret, or you got to keep the trust list short if you want to make it to final.
Yeah, well, it wasn't a great sound when I recorded it. When I recorded my sound, it was long enough where I had to record it at 7 kilohertz, so it sounded like a phone call. When we did Everybody Sing Apple II, we could do it I think I digitized it at 16K, so it sounded really nice and throaty. Yeah. It was nice. It's still in there. People should listen to it.
That's very cool.
Secret about box. I don't even remember how to get into the secret about box. I think you go into the classic control panel and press some combination of keys.
Yes. Well, that's a really great story. I'm sure that you got a lot of fun stuff from the Apple IIGS team. I know that Woz was kind of like, listen, we're trying to keep this alive the best we can, pushing back kind of against Macintosh taking over a lot of Apple's headspace, even though the Apple II carried the company for way longer than what people I think most people just out in the world think about.
Well, I mean, here's an interesting fact. Here's an interesting fact. At one point in time at Apple, we went by colors. We had blue. Blue was Mac OS. Mac OS 6. And we had pink, and that was Taligent. And then we had something for the peripherals. And then we had green. Green was the Apple II team. And we were green because of the color of the back of money. Because we were the cash cow that was feeding the rest of the company for a while.
Yes.
And, there was no real, it's good that we loved our product so much and we really wanted it to succeed. We busted our ass on System 5 because we loved it so much. But at the end of the day, you can't keep it static. Things have to keep changing. Things have to keep being renewed. You have to have new ideas. And, the Apple II was kind of running out of life. It was kind of reaching the end of its limit. And the problem is by the time the Apple II GS ROM 3 came out, the Macintosh was really doing well.
Mhm.
It was well established. It was really doing well. And if it didn't run Apple IIe software, nobody would buy it because our primary customer was schools
Right.
for the Apple II line. Schools was our big customer. They bought more than half of all of the Apple IIs sold by that point in time. I mean, they loved the Apple II because they had lesson plans and curriculum and
Right.
libraries of
Yeah.
floppies. You've seen them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. MECC, and then
Yes.
the collection of things that you dropped in the mail, and yeah.
I just sent a truckload of floppy drives to the middle of nowhere in Kansas to be cataloged
Archived and preserved.
and
Yes.
preserved for all Apple II posterity,
Yes.
or have the duplicates given to some people at KansasFest, maybe.
Yeah.
Because why not?
Yeah,
there's some
absolutely.
cool games in there. Some of those
There
educational games are seriously cool.
They are.
Crack out an educational game. Play one of those MECC games. Some of those are really great.
They are really great.
But
and it's not all Oregon Trail. There's tons of other amazing things.
No, there's like 9 different Carmen Sandiegos.
Yeah.
Oh my God, there were so many Carmen Sandiegos in those boxes.
Oh yeah.
But
quite a few.
But the people really wanted to run the Apple IIe software. That's what they wanted. The Apple II's biggest customer was schools, and they loved the Apple IIe software, and I couldn't blame them.
Mm-hmm.
It worked great. It did exactly what they wanted. It was fun. It engaged the kids. The developers didn't see any reason to upgrade it to 2GS only because why?
Yeah.
The 2GS can run the 2E games.
Right.
And the school still had a bunch of 2Es.
Right.
And 2Cs.
Right.
So, things had to change.
Yeah. Well, speaking of changes, the 900-pound elephant in the room, or whatever, in terms of, because the
Apple
2GS, yeah, well,
are you talking about that Apple III back there? It's not 900 pounds. That's only 150 pounds.
Right. Well, 2023 KansasFest did, it was a whole thing about Apple III. So it's kind of one of those things. I learned a lot at that event that I never knew about that machine. But what I was talking about though, is the next generation of the Apple IIGS software, the Mark Twain. So I know that there's a lot of speculation and misinformation out there about what the Mark Twain was going to be and what it was going to offer customers, and how you talk to some folks and it's like, well, it was going to be a 8 megahertz machine that was going to basically just address all of the shortcomings that people felt that the older 2GS hardware had. Set the record straight. Like, what were some of the redesign concerns? What were things that actually made it in? And what are some of the stuff that people have just imagined?
Well, I can tell you that Mark Twain did have built-in storage. Mm-hmm. So there you go. It had the concept of built-in storage, and why not? So there was a floppy connector on the board that you'd plug a 3.5-inch drive that sat proudly and spewed right out the front of the unit. Very cool. Looked very cool. It was not going to run 14 megahertz. People don't. There were 2 primary limitations at the time. One was the availability of faster 65/816s. As it turns out, in 1989, Western Design Center was making 8 and 12 megahertz 65/816s. And they sold each one of them they could make to the people who made the wasn't called the Zip 2GS. It was a different name for it.
It's a TransWarp.
TransWarp. It was the TransWarp 2GS. And TransWarp was buying their entire yield. And they were making 500-600 boards a month. They were not making 12,000 boards a month or 14,000 boards a month or 18,000 boards a month. That's how many 65816s they would need to have to put in a faster 65816. We would have needed 16,000 a month.
Yeah.
That's a lot. It's an awful lot. And it would have been a strain on Western Design Center's fab capability, quite frankly. They didn't have the fab to do it. And I mean, they knew how to do it, but they didn't have the fabrication space and everything else to do it. But the other problem is I don't know if you've looked at a TransWarp GS or any of the other accelerators. Look at the RAM that's on them. They all had cached RAM.
Yeah.
They had like a 64K cache of RAM because nobody could afford a megabyte of RAM fast enough to use with an 8 or a 10 megahertz 65816. The fact is, every clock cycle on a 65816 is a memory cycle. Every clock cycle is a memory cycle. There's no dead cycles. I know there are memory cycles that don't do anything. And one for a few opcodes. But by and large, everything is a memory transaction. And there's no way to distinguish between an actual memory transaction and a false memory transaction in the 65816. So every clock cycle, an address appears on the bus. Read or write is either high or low. It's either reading or writing every single cycle. So that means your RAM has to be responding to every single cycle. And so you can't just crank up the speed without putting faster RAM in. And honestly, by 1992, that was faster RAM.
Sure.
A lot faster RAM by 1992. But in 1989, there was not. The problem is by 1992, there wasn't really any appetite to keep going on the Apple IIGS. There wasn't really any reason to keep doing it. And, most of the Apple II engineering team had moved over to work on a new Macintosh project at the time.
Right.
So they kind of had a skeleton crew in the Apple II division anyway. And you couldn't make it more expensive. The charm of the 2GS was that it was under $1,000.
Right.
The charm of the 2GS was that it's for schools. It's got to be cheap. It's got to have a color screen so that people are engaged in it. It's got to be bright and it's got to have that nice sound, but it doesn't have to be, a pro audio workstation. It has to just sound cool and do nice stuff.
Right.
But it had to be cheap because that's what people wanted. Mm-hmm. That's what the schools wanted. They didn't want to spend too much money. And that's why a lot of the Apple II team went over to start a Macintosh team.
Yeah.
Because
no, I understand. You have to go where the business is, and you got to go where the boss says that we need your efforts and stuff. But before you exited to a Macintosh team, there was this little event that took place in July of 1990. Apple put together a team of people and said, "Hey, we're going to send you to this small user conference." At the time, it was called the A2 Central Summer Conference.
They sent us to the middle of a cornfield.
They did.
There was a college in the middle of a cornfield, and they said, "Go there."
Was there some apprehension about kind of going out there in the wild and talking to these hyper enthusiastic people?
We loved it. We loved going to talk to people about this. We went to Apple Fest in Boston in 1989 for the 2GS rollout, or after the 2GS rollout. We loved that people loved the Apple II. We got a kick out of it. Yeah. I mean, you can't not get a kick out. You go to this place and there are all of these people and you look at them and you go, what are you people doing here? I don't know what you're doing here. But the fact is, it doesn't matter what you think. You can think that all you want, but it doesn't matter what you think because they love your product. They use it. They learn things about it. Some of them know maybe not more than you do, or I do, or I did, but they knew things I didn't know because you can't know everything, right?
Sure.
And there were some people there who really had certain parts of the thing dialed in, and they could talk coherently about it. And I remember talking to, I can't even remember their names. There were these two game developers, and geez, they had such great ideas for how they were getting around the bus speed on the 2GS to get their animations to sparkle. And I really liked some of their ideas. I thought that, that's great. That's some cutting edge stuff. And I thought so I loved talking to them. And I think I did a presentation there on something. I think I might have done two presentations. I don't remember.
I know
on
back
what.
in those days, the conference was only like, I think 3 days long or 2 days long.
Yeah.
And they would have sessions that would run kind of simultaneously. So
Yeah.
the keynote for the event was the Apple IIGS system software update.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that there were a lot of people, because that would have been maybe right around the time of System 5. So
I think that was Greg Branch and because I'm sure we would have had Greg Branch there, myself, probably Harry was up there. I don't know if Steve was there. Yeah, I wonder if HyperCard was out by then.
I think the very next year was Roger Wagner.
HyperCard was out the next year.
Yeah.
Because then we didn't have Andy or any of the other HyperCard people. I'll bet you maybe Suki went to that one. I don't know. We had some really good people there. We had a couple of hardware guys, a couple of firmware guys, and a couple of system software guys. So, and when I say guy, I mean people. I don't mean male human beings. I mean people.
Sure.
I'm from Chicago. We call everybody a guy.
Yeah, I'm from the Midwest too. Everybody's, hey, you guys coming over?
Yes.
Right.
But yeah, there was like, I don't know, there must have been a half a dozen of us.
Yeah.
And we went on the company's dime, and it was interesting. I mean, and I remember being there, and I remember, we might have had a marketing person. Ron Lichty might have been there. Or David Ives. Probably Ron Lichty. Anyway, we probably would have had a marketing person with us, and we probably talked to people and gave some presentations and probably did some Q&As or anything. I'm not really sure. I wasn't there. Oh, wait, I was there. I don't remember.
Well, I as someone all these years later, asking you questions about all those years ago, thanks for coming, and hopefully maybe one day you'll make it back.
Sure. Maybe.
You never know.
I'm not as smart as I used to be.
Oh, it's not about that. It's just about
my memory ain't quite what it ought to be.
Well, let me ask you this. This is maybe the biggest question. Was there ever a time that you thought that 40 years later people would still be talking about the 2GS and celebrating all the amazing engineering?
No.
And
no, absolutely not.
Is it shocking that people still are? I mean, of all the things, I mean, nostalgia
kinda
is such a
it's a little worrying to me sometimes because, well, no, hear me out. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but it's like it was a job, and we were creating a consumable product.
Mhm.
We weren't creating, when you bought a car, you bought a statement, right? Because
Mhm.
you drove it around and people saw it, and you put on uh, lifters, and you put on a fancy set of wheel covers, and a little rat tail from your aerial. Or I mean, cars had a proud long tradition of being a cool thing, and
Mhm.
people loved old cars, and so that was a thing. But people didn't love old computers. People hated old computers because old computers, rightly so, sucked. They were terrible. I mean, you look at 1982.
Mhm.
The computers from 1972 sucked. You're talking about an IBM 36030, which had 32K words of RAM. And it booted off of a stack of punched cards or a 9-track tape. It couldn't even boot from a hard disk.
Mhm.
They were horrible. And computers kept being horrible. I mean, I compare an IMSI 8080 and what you had to do just to get the thing to boot. I had a buddy of mine who worked at Nabby's. He wanted to turn his computer on, turn the power on, hit a toggle in a cassette loader to load a cassette tape
Right.
that contained the disk loader that would boot his Tarbell disk controller.
Yeah.
I mean, they were terrible. So old computers had a very long history of being shockingly bad. And I mean, in 1989, you'd look at an 128K Mac and compare that to an Apple IIGS, and you'd just laugh at how much better the 2GS was than the 128K Mac. Wow, what a piece of junk that was. Look, this is way better. It's faster, and it can do it in color. Because when we did the ROM 3GS, things got faster. But the point is that no, we didn't imagine people would still be enamored of them because computers had a habit of becoming trash. They would become just garbage. They were just taking up space and doing nothing. At least with a car, you could always drive the car.
It's
You,
true.
I mean, I drove a 1966 Dodge Dart for ever, but you just couldn't keep using the computer. So yeah, none of us thought. I had no idea anybody would care about the Apple IIGS 40 years later.
Yeah. I
I
think
mean,
it's kind of one of those things where it's we've had several decades to kind of experience newer things, and the 2GS for a lot of folks represents kind of maybe a simpler time in computing, maybe in their lives, and so you look into the future. And you kind of see like, oh, everything's changing, and there's innovations, and it kind of this push into AI, and kind of closing people off from
mhm,
expanding and doing things kind of on
mhm.
their own with machines as
Sure.
a closed box. So that future that's uncertain, I can look back at the 2GS, even with limitations, and those memories get brighter all the time.
Well, and I get it now. I understand what people are doing, and I get it.
Hmm.
It's a comfort factor.
Yeah.
But it's also something else. And it's something that, I mean, I didn't expect you to want the Apple IIGS. Never expected you would want the damn thing 20 years later. I died a little bit inside with Mac OS 10.
Yeah.
Because Mac OS 10, actually, probably Mac OS 9, maybe it was 9.1. But that was the first time where I could look at an Apple system disk and scratch my head and go, yeah, I have no idea what's going on here.
Hmm.
I don't know what's going on. When this happens, I don't know. With actually with classic Mac OS, Mac OS 9 and earlier,
Mhm.
I knew what was happening. You press the mouse button, I could tell you what was happening. I could tell you where the code was. I
Mhm.
could tell you what it was doing and what it was thinking at the time. I knew how the virtual memory worked. I knew how everything worked. I got it.
Mhm.
On the 2GS, there wasn't a hole of the 2GS that I couldn't just step right into and fix bugs and write software for. There was no toolbox I couldn't use. There was no system service I couldn't take advantage of. There was no bit of hardware that I could not manipulate to my own advantage. When Mac OS 10 came out, that went away. No one knew how it all worked. You couldn't. It was too much. There was too much going on. You had to specialize. You had to know your stuff. You couldn't know everybody else's stuff because no one's brain is that big. I mean, you could know a lot of it. Gets less and less over the years, but you could know a lot of Mac OS 10, but you couldn't know all of it.
Certainly.
And so that's kind of when I felt, God, I really miss the 2GS. I miss walking into my office and turning on a computer and knowing confidently, okay, it beeped. I know what it's doing. Okay, it cleared the screen. I know what it just did. I know where it did it. I know who wrote that code. I know everything about that. And with Mac OS 10, you never got that. So yeah, I longed for it, but I longed for it for a different reason. I longed for it because I was more comfortable with it. It was a more comfortable way of working for me
Absolutely.
when you could know everything. And honestly, I think that's really one of the things that drives old computer nostalgia because it's not just old farts um, who are liking the hobby. There are younger people getting into it too. And I think the reason some younger people get into it is because they like the feeling of understanding it gives them. Like I watch some videos by that Ben Eater guy,
Hmm.
and I think he does an excellent job of kind of putting in a nutshell, look, this is how it worked. This is what happened. You had a processor and you'd feed it in a heartbeat. And oh, look, it's doing what the manual says it's going to do. It's looking for a boot vector in memory. And we're going to have to put memory here and we got to put ROM here. And here's what this does. And here's why it's doing it. And here's why we're responding the way we're responding. I think people like that idea. They like the idea of, because they understand at a fundamental level that's how it still works. That's how it all works still. It's just 1,000 times more of it. But it's all still fundamentally the same. You turn on the power to any processor, even an Apple M4 chip that's in my iMac here, does the same thing. First thing it's going to do is it's going to go through its reset sequence. It's going to go out and find a boot vector. It's going to load in the first byte of, or the first word of the boot code, and it's going to run the boot monitor code. And the boot monitor code is going to go to the disk and it's going to load this off the disk. And so it all still works the same way. It's just doing it so much more of it so much faster that it's overwhelming today. You can't take a modern processor and put together, kludge together a system. You have to basically build it all or nothing. Whereas, like what Ben Eater is doing on his channel is basically, look, I'll add some RAM now. Ooh, now I have RAM. Now I can run subroutines.
Mhm.
It's I think that's why people like it, and I think that's why younger people are starting to like it, is because it's accessible, it's understandable. It's It's like learning algebra before you learn calculus.
You got to know where you've been to know where you're going.
Yes. Maybe.
Well, Mensch, thank you
Yes.
so much
Sure.
for chatting today. This has been really, really educational for me. I
Of
know that
course.
you're kind of one of those people that has such a huge, a wide breadth of knowledge about like Apple, and like you've been through the Apple II and you've been through the Macintosh stuff. That I mean, there's a whole other conversation for the future about all the projects and stuff that you did on the Macintosh team. I thank you so much for taking time.
Wait, there's one more question you have to ask me.
Oh, what's that?
You have to ask me about Mac OS 8.6.